Hey, party people. I'm Lia Scholl, pastor of First Friends here in beautiful Greensboro, and I'm grateful that you've taken time to be with me today. I am sitting in the library at First Friends, and I hope sometime you'll come by and check out the wonderful books here. Today, we're talking about Joseph and Potiphar's wife, and good girls and bad girls and really bad girls. So be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. We skipped a lot from last week to get to Joseph this week. We talked about Abraham last week. So we've got Father Abraham and many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. Actually, he only had two sons, Ishmael and Isaac. Ishmael goes on to start a different colony of folks at some point, and Isaac marries Rebekah, and they have Jacob and Esau. You remember Esau was the hairy one, and they have a difficult time between the two brothers. Jacob marries Rachel and Leah, and he has two concubines too, and between the four of the women, they have 12 children. One of them, who is Rachel's son, is Jacob's favorite. His name is Joseph. And Jacob gave Joseph a multicolored coat. You remember all these stories, I'm sure. This made Joseph's brothers very jealous, so they sold him into slavery in Egypt. Joseph eventually becomes a steward to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, but Potiphar's wife tries to seduce him, or so the story goes, and charges are leveled at Joseph, and he is imprisoned. I just want to be honest here. There's a lot of times in the Bible that women get the short shrift. In fact, they get the short shrift so much that Liz Curtis Higgs wrote a book about these quote unquote bad women, bad girls of the Bible, and made a lot of money at it. Let me be clear, she made a lot of money out of making women, I think, feel bad about themselves because she made so much of these somewhat good women in the Bible into so-called bad women of the Bible. She treats every woman in the Bible as if there are only three ways to be: good girls, bad girls, or really bad girls. And since 99% of the women I know in real life are none of those three things, wholly none of those three things, I say, let's change the lens through which we see these stories. At its base, today's story is supposed to be a story about how wonderful Joseph is, that he turned down the seductress and went to prison for it. Look how moral he is. But let's take the text apart a little bit and see the intersectionality of it. I'm using an analysis of the gender bias in Genesis 39 written by Daniela Feitinger in 2016. And there are a few notes that she makes about this text. First, Mrs. Potiphar does not have a name. She is only defined by her husband, an important and wealthy man. And make you know, never mind, she would have been considered part of his capital, a trophy, as it were. And to be a good trophy, she had to be chaste, right? That's like an expectation in there. So when she makes a pass at a slave, as one scholar put it, overstepping her authority as a woman, she acts in masculine power, power that only men are entitled to. And note, she doesn't so much seduce Joseph. She doesn't woo him. She's not dropping flowers off for him every day. Instead, she commands Joseph, lie with me. If the gender were different here, we'd be talking about assault, not seduction. So she's acting supposedly in a masculine way, But as she's about to be discovered, that same scholar says she has to spin a tale that appeals to patriarchal logic and then falls kind of into the stereotypically feminine behavior. What she does seems to confirm the dominant expression of women as sneaky, backbiting, and lying. Again, it's a stereotype. So, in brief, the woman acts outside of gender norms. She gets caught. She reverts to stereotypical gender norms, quote unquote manipulation. She's portrayed as a femme fatale, a dangerous person with bad intentions who is lascivious and desirable. Of course, this isn't the only way to read the story, but it does speak to really understanding these texts through an intersectional lens. Could Mrs. Potiphar be seen as acting out an intersectional power struggle? The powerful man's wife versus the powerful man's slave. What about the intersectionality of the native woman, an Egyptian woman, versus the foreign man, a Hebrew man? Is there more going on in this text? And what is the writer's purpose with this text? I think it's clear that he's trying to make Joseph the hero. I'll have you note that the story of David and Bathsheba is not very different from this story. David is the one who makes a pass at a woman. Probably, if you look at it intersectionally, he had way more power than she did. And it probably was against her own will, much like this story. But somehow we seem to forgive David. We don't bring that up in the long list of everything we say about him. We seem to forgive him. We don't forget Mrs. Potiphar. So what are we to do with the gender stereotypes in the Bible? And with this sometimes vision of women that there's only three types: good girls, bad girls, and really bad girls. We deal with it in the same way that we deal with all stereotypes today. We become aware of our implicit biases. We consider the context in which something happened. We individualize folks, and we see folks from a different perspective. And we always look at power dynamics. If we do that, can we see Potiphar's wife somewhat differently? Could she have been a very lonely woman who met a kind man in her household? Could she have been a person vying for power in her own household and agency in her own life? Could she have been the victim? Or could she have been a driven woman with wily ways? Any one of these perspectives are appropriate to bring to the text and to bring that multiplicity of perspectives into our own lives. When we see someone acting in a way that we think is a wily woman, maybe we take a step back and look for that same kind of perspective. As Quakers, we see that of God in everyone. And we ask that same thing of the text. What is of God in Mrs. Potiphar? She too had parents and potentially siblings. She too had a spouse and perhaps children. She too lived in fullness as a whole person. We only see this one moment. can we and must we see that of God in all the people in the whole of the Bible? Can we bring that perspective to it? So, as we move into waiting worship today, a query for you. Where have you stereotyped others, whether gender or race or age or education or able-bodiedness or handicap? And where have you been surprised when you got it wrong? Glad to see you today. I love you and I love being your pastor.